Hello everyone, welcome back to Maritime Software Hub, the People Podcast. My name's Callum, I run the podcast and I'm also the founder of a search and recruitment agency called Cordell Beaumont. In this episode, I'm really excited to be joined by Mike Powell, who's the Chief Business Officer of a company called StratumFive. He's had a fascinating career and a really interesting journey across the commercial shipping and also the digital shipping space. So let's dive into the episode and meet Mike. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Callum. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, my pleasure as well. It's obviously a real treat to have you on. We've spoken a few times at a few networking events over the years, and I've always wanted to try and bring you on the show because you've got a very varied background. You've got a wealth of knowledge, I'm sure, that our audience will find really valuable. So I've given a brief intro, but I obviously don't think I can do it justice. So would it be okay if you can share a little bit of an overview of your background and kind of what your day-to-day role is now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the potted history is like a lot of seafarers of my generation. I went to sea at 17 years old, and then I ended up commanding ships, and I've been in shipping now for 43 years. And I think over that time, the industry's changed quite a lot. There's a lot more changes to come. I think this is now one of the most exciting times probably to be in shipping. My day-to-day role since I stepped away from leading tanker operations has been in the kind of process re-engineering, efficiency, and just making shipping a better place. I think operations is about delivery, not drama. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to deliver that.
Yeah, no, good. Well, I think you talked about operations there, and that's going to be something we're going to touch on a little bit later in the episode. And so now your day-to-day role, where are you spending majority of your time? Because I know you wear a few different hats, and you've got a few projects.
I do, yeah. Well, I think it's partly because the shipping industry, despite being a fantastic industry to work in, it's also can be very volatile. So about 12 years ago, I started up Cardinal Point Marine, which is essentially a company that markets my expertise to those that are interested. And I work with developing digital strategy and digital transformation, which is obviously a very hot topic at this point. Perhaps we'll touch on that a bit later. And I work on oil transportation projects too, as an associate with Wood Mackenzie, for example, the names of those groups. I've also worked with EY and Wärtsilä and a whole bunch of others in that area. So I think I guess not having a proper job, I employed myself, and that's been the way it's been for the last 12 years.
I can relate. I think the last nearly 5 years or so, it's having your own businesses and different projects on the go. It keeps you very busy, but you've got to keep structured somehow. But no, fantastic, good. And so StratumFive in particular, so you're the Chief Business Officer there at the moment. Tell us a bit about that, what the company does, and how you kind of help your customers essentially.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a story behind. Stuart Nichols, who's the head of StratumFive, and I go back some way, largely through the experience that I had in operations with companies like BP Shipping and Glencore. I've been banging the drum for software solutions to make operations better. As I said, that's one of my things. And he was one of the people that was listening. And eventually, I started working with Stuart and his team to develop a product called Podium 5, which is a data integration platform, software as a service, data integration platform, weather, and it's all about voyage optimization. But it's about taking data out of the silos that they're in and displaying them on a almost like it sounds a bit grand, but like pit lane software that you see in Formula One, where they've got all the sensors on the car, but that gives you a picture of performance, a granulated picture of performance. And that's really what StratumFive does. It sort of, in some respects, reflects a wish list that I wrote in 2015, I think. But my digital journey goes back a wee bit further than that. I introduced electronic bills of lading to BP Shipping. I was chairman of the management and change committee for that. We had a very early version of just-in-time arrival in BP shipping as well, and I think that's led to identifying inefficiencies in operations and trying to address them with software solutions has been a big part of what I've done over the last decade or so.
No, that's fascinating. And prior to that, obviously, if we rewind a little bit, you obviously studied law, and what was your kind of initial kind of interest and passion for the legal side of shipping?
Well, oh gosh, again, a little way back. That goes back a long way. So back in 1998, we introduced something called the ISM code, the International Safety Management Code, and this was a piece of regulation that required ship owners to have a certificate that said they were competent to operate ships. Now, given that, prior to that, if I turned around to you, and I hope someday you will have enough money to buy an aircraft, but if I turned around to you and said, Callum, right, you're going to operate a passenger airline service, and all you need is money to buy an aircraft, and that makes you an airline operator, you'd turn around and say that was insane. But that was the situation in shipping for centuries, is that all you needed to be a ship owner was enough money to buy a ship. So back in 1998, as a consequence of some accidents where the shoreside management was criticized in the investigation, they introduced regulation that said, you need to have a certificate that says you are competent to operate ships. And there were a bunch of components in there that included audit trails and all sorts of things where the lawyers started saying, you can't do that. You can't have audit trails. You can't have accountability. You can't have these things where you might break your right to limit liability. So there was a lot of noise around this really significant change in shipping back then. And so I got engaged with a lot of arguments with lawyers because I was trying to implement those systems that they were telling ship owners they should be cautious about having. So that was really where, and that got to a point where a lawyer said to me, well, if you're so clever, then why don't you join us and have a go? And that's how I ended up working with Stevenson Harwood, and really enjoyed the qualification as a lawyer, but ultimately was recruited back into an operations role with an oil and gas exploration company.
Fantastic. So you combine that experience of actual seafaring, hands-on shipping experience with the maritime law background, or were you on board vessels after you studied in law?
No, I'd left the sea in a couple of years before that. I think so I qualified in 2002, but just simply didn't stay in law. But when I looked at and again, part of that is volatility at the time and changes in the way that legal services were provided in London, and just being offered an opportunity that just ticked all the boxes. But when you look at qualification as a lawyer and the skills that you acquire that way, in terms of developing yourself, there wasn't much risk of losing on that. It was going to be good to be a lawyer in a law firm or outside a law firm was fine. There was little difference between the two.
And what when you were sailing on board vessels? Sorry to jump around a little bit between
That's
law
right.
and I'm really interested. Anyone that's been on board vessels, I really like to hear their experiences and what technology perhaps was like back then and what it's like now. So, which type of vessels were you mainly on when you were sailing?
So I specialised in the carriage of dangerous liquid chemicals. That was my, and also, but not just those, but so chemical tankers, but they carry almost anything that's in liquid form. So, but including the dangerous stuff. So that was my specialisation for the most part. Although I did take a 2-year sabbatical delivering bananas across the Atlantic. So, so that was the seagoing stuff. In terms of the seagoing tech, I mean, there's been a lot of changes, but there's also been a lot of stuff that just remains the same. I was last at a ship launching in 10 years ago, 2013, and I thought I would, with a couple of exceptions, I'd have been relatively comfortable driving that one myself. But really, it was the electronic chart displays that I really had to get used to. But there's a lot of established tech on ships, and it's not broken, so why fix it? But I think what's happening now with the decarbonisation drive is new tech, particularly propulsion technology, and then automated systems as well. So there's a lot of change that's coming necessarily because of those agendas.
Okay, no, fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing from the bit of insight into your
I can
background.
tell you that we, since I started, we have stopped loading animals 2 by 2. So that's
Okay. No problem, Noah. That's good. Okay, excellent. Well, as far as to the meat of kind of the main topic of this discussion today is going to be regarding around your role where you were the head of vessel operations, as you said, for different companies, BP, and also at Glencore you mentioned. So, can you talk us a bit about how you transitioned into that position, and what your kind of day to day sort of, I guess, responsibilities and duties were?
yeah. I think the within BP Shipping, where I first took on the commercial operations lead role, that was just part of the almost the sort of regular change of roles that big corporations tend to do. They tend to move managers and executives around it so they get a wider experience of the business. And I got into the operations role through that. BP had hundreds of cargoes on the water every day of the week. And the job of the global voyage operations manager, as I was there, was really to support the team that were delivering those voyages and make sure that they had the tools that they needed to deliver those voyages safely and commercially successfully as well. So the operations has you usually dealing with what's in front of you, and so it's very much right at the minute. And then, like I said, it's about delivery, not drama. The majority of voyages go routinely,
Yeah.
and your job is to make sure that that continues to be the case to the best of your ability. And then, so that's then as you walk around, Glencore was a very different. I was recruited to join Glencore. ST Shipping and Transport, very different environment, a full trading environment, the largest charter fleet, one of the largest charter fleets in the world, slightly different perspective. But I think wandering around, listening to the conversations at the desk, and I'm trying to give you an example of the kind of inefficiency sometimes that creeps into operations. You'd hear somebody on a telephone conversation to a captain saying, "Captain, I've just sent you an email." And you just think, how many times is that conversation happening in the 5,000 voyages that I'm doing today? And then you realize that actually what you have is a significant inefficiency. And then you've got people that are monitoring everything all the time. And they think, surely there's a way that we can just get to a more exception-based way of running this operation and then the other things we talk about 24/7 delivery, and 24/7 means, I've got a mobile phone by my bed. So there were a lot of aspects of operations which had a legacy. They hadn't changed for a long time. Yeah. And there were a lot of inefficiencies in there where software and digital solutions can address or lift some of the burden of monitoring the operation and tell you when things are going in the wrong direction.
You mentioned that kind of wish list of things you had back then. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Perhaps certain sort of ways that technology could have helped?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the data integration, so being able to accommodate, I can remember one of the companies I worked for, we had something like 13 software applications to deliver one decision. But you had to access these 13 different things to accumulate enough information to make one decision. And so obviously the consolidation of data in one place so that you could run rules over it and make that decision more efficiently. That was one of the big things. That was one of the big parts of that transition. Being able to run rules over things so that they would alert you when things gone wrong rather than you have to physically go and check. And having sort of like RAG codes, red, amber, green, for whether a voyage had a, if you had it on a good day, what you'd like to do as the head of operations when you got 300 cargoes on the water, how can you interact with all those voyages in a meaningful way? And that's by filtering them. So you could go in the morning and see, I'll take a look at the reds first. Are there any reds? Let's get into those. Are there any ambers? And the greens, provided they stay green, you just left them be, so you wouldn't have to do anything about that. That was the sort of the vision, and then there's a lot of mandatory reporting of various kinds, and that should be dealt with automatically. You shouldn't have to expend energy on that. There's no value there. You just need to comply, and so there's no value in compliance other than obviously not compliance is a bad thing, but there isn't any. You can't add any value to compliance other than making it as easy as possible for the operators.
And do you think now there are solutions available that kind of cover off those kind of wish lists that you had earlier?
Yeah, I think not nobody's got the entire thing, because I think that's the nature of wish lists. You can't deliver it all, but I think the industry's getting a lot closer. I think obviously, I would say that StratumFive have got very close to it through their development, but there are other players out there who are got great ideas about what they're doing, and I think one of the things where they struggle in shipping is getting the space to grow, because at the end of the day, the addressable market in shipping is actually very, very small. You're only talking about whatever 60, 70,000 trading units, and you quite often find software providers who've got 400 ships, but I think to get the scale needed to survive, you're going to need to do a lot better than that. So you need thousands of ships rather than just hundreds.
Briefly interrupt this episode to talk to you about our brand new online course, which is the Introduction to Commercial Shipping. I'm really excited to deliver this. Essentially, since kind of growing up in my teens and my early 20s, I've always worked and been surrounded by the sale and purchase and the shipbroking industry in particular. So for the last 20 plus years, I've kind of harvested some real, insights and passion for the commercial shipping space. So the course is perfect for anybody that's either working in shipping, perhaps is studying shipping, or wants to learn the basic fundamental kind of aspects of the commercial shipping space. This is ideal because you can log on, it's completely on demand. You just start learning. It automatically saves your progress, so you can log in and log out. There's multiple choice quizzes after each chapter. So on the course, you'll learn about the overall commercial shipping markets, looking at dry cargo, tankers, containers, the gas markets. We'll look at the different dimensions and sizes and categories of vessels. We'll talk about who are the main importers and exporters of certain kind of commodities across the world. We'll look at the role of a ship owner and a shipbroker, what they do day to day, how their company's structured. Go through what a sale and purchase broker does, what a chartering shipbroker does. We look at key shipping contracts, including the charter parties themselves, some of the key clauses that are contained in there. We look at the sale and purchase contracts, so the NSF forms, the memorandum of associations, those sort of things, to give you a good rounded overview of the commercial shipping space. So for more information, please do message info@cordellbeaumont.com or send me a message online, and I'll be delighted to share it with you. Thank you. And you touched upon some obviously high-level challenges of that role when you're in a senior vessel operations position. Are there any other kind of key challenges that you can think of, just in case anybody that's listening is perhaps interested in a career in that space, or maybe they're talk day to day with operations teams and they're selling a digital solution, so they can kind of understand the nuances of the role a little bit better?
Well, I think operations. The great thing about operations is it's the engine room of the corporation. It delivers the voyages that have been sold, and it also has the potential to kill the anticipated margin of that somebody who sold that voyage was expecting. So it really is the engine room of it all, and leads to the recovery of the revenue, the freight revenue, and all the other aspects of that. So the difficulty perhaps with operations is sometimes getting your head out of the day to day and thinking strategically, and because you're constantly dealing with what's in front of you, and there's a constant flow of that. So if the adoption of digital solutions allows people a little bit more space to take a more strategic view of what they're doing, then it will have achieved something. But operations is just so much fun, because you just never know what the world is going to throw at you next. So when I say fun, it can be challenging as well, but you just don't know what's coming around the corner. If you think about February 22nd, February of 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and all the consequences of that. Somebody can throw in an event like that at you, and you have to start scrambling to cope with it. So, so that's if you don't like that environment where you're constantly challenged, then operations may not be for you.
Yeah, and I saw, I guess, more from the shipbroking operations side in my time at Clarkson's and other companies where the operation teams you're very much on call kind of 24/7, and it sounds like yeah, weekends, evenings, that type of thing. Anything can happen. So international, you need to be contactable. So I do think it's a tough role. I think that can take a toll on you over the years.
Well, I think you raise a really good point there, because that culture, that 24/7 culture, excludes a lot of people from the industry, and people who could actually do the industry some good. And of course, a lot of people took pride on that 24/7 culture, or sleeping under their desks, or under the sort of work hard, play hard mentality, which is fine. But however, that does exclude a lot of good people from what we're doing. So if the digitalization, the technology transformation, if that works, I think the industry will be a lot more accessible, because in an environment where you don't have to work like that, then it becomes more appealing. I think this is true of seagoing as well. The British, the UK dominated shipping for decades, centuries, and a lot of our systems have been adopted by other countries and other flags. But there's a question around the culture, and the culture was around you fit or you fail.
Okay.
And so people used to talk to me about the romance of the sea, and you've got salt in your blood. And my traditional answer to that was no. Seafarers are beaten into submission until they're fit for nothing else. And that's so that sounds a bit brutal, but actually the training in some respects is brutal. And it didn't accommodate a range of individuals. It meant if you were going to succeed at sea, then you fit that box. And if you didn't fit, then you failed. And I think to encourage diversity, things need to change. And I think they are changing for the better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I guess some people might perceive the operations team as not a cost center, certainly, because as you say, everything needs to be kind of adhered to that's been agreed for in a charter party or those type of things. So I guess it's changing that perspective from maybe if you look at the role of a chartering team or a broking team, they're more the money makers essentially, and the operations team is slightly different, perhaps. And maybe they need to change the perspective of the different teams. I'm not sure. That might entice more people into those sort of roles.
Well, no, again, another really good point. And certainly in my time, I have fought within the sort of benchmarking exercises that big companies take to get operations the recognition that I believe it deserves. Because I think there's an expression, I may be quoting this incorrectly, but it's operations eat strategy for breakfast. So and so it can kill if you don't have a good operating environment. Then the profit that you anticipated, they can spend that in no time at all. So if your voyages are on fine margins, operations can kill that.
Yeah, and I think the operations role can sometimes be perceived as a stepping stone role. So if you want to be a charterer, let's say one day you want to learn the operations of how to fix what goes on behind after a fixture. Same in broking, and then you eventually want to jump over to be a broker or a charterer, perhaps. So
I think that should be compulsory.
Yeah, you do.
I think every charterer should spend some time in operations.
Okay, yeah. Well, we used to do it obviously on the broking side, and it gives them a great perspective of what happens the day in, day out, and interacting with different teams within ship owners and charterers and stuff. So I think it's an interesting space, very interesting. We used to spend a lot of time recruiting vessel operators and post-fixture analysts and claims analysts, that type of thing. It's a really kind of interesting market if you're in the right type of mindset and you're interested in that sort of way.
As an operations lead, I think your wish is that the charterers have the attention to detail that operators have, because sometimes they're and I don't wish to denigrate charterers in general, but they're the 6-gun shooters, and they'll give you an as per last done, and then you've got to try and find out what the hell that was. Yeah. And so in terms of sort of charter origination through to operation and recovery, if the charterers spend that little bit of extra time crafting the voyage accurately, then it makes operations much more simple to deliver the voyage, and then it makes the recovery. The claims team are normally at the back end of where what I used to call crap catcher occurs. So there they are. They're working at the end of this process line, and normally all the crap and all the emissions that went on end up on their desk. And so if your claims team is having a pretty straightforward day, then everybody else has done their job quite well, because that's actually where the money is. So when the charterer rings the bell and they've done the deal, and then of course that deal is not done until the money is in the bank. And so you really need to look at your recovery processes, because that's the real measure of your success as a trading operation.
Okay. It's a bit off topic. If I was to start up let's say my own maritime software company, and I wanted to try and serve a need to make vessel operators and operations teams' lives so much better and easier, what do you think would be the key things that my solution should focus on or offer?
Well, I think the end-to-end solution must have an analytics component to start with. So if you're trading, if you're freight trading, you need to identify those opportunities, and I think what the technology can do is give you that first mover advantage, more so than every broker puts their position lists out every day, and here's your cargo lists, and everybody's looking at that at the same time. But if you can get some insight into that fleet positioning, that allows you an analytical component. Then contract generation. So rather to avoid that, so your charter parties are more sound, and then that goes into voyage instruction. So creating that voyage that's going to be communicated to the captain, and a lot of that can be automated right to the point where you've got the voyage instruction to the ship. Then of course you've gone onto the ship, so now you need to monitor the asset, what it's doing, where it's doing it, in what environment is it doing it, and then the actual execution of the voyage. Then it's a lot of stuff, a lot of data that you can use that makes sure that that's actually happening. And then of course the recovery portion is then that much easier, because you get to send out your invoices on the basis, because you don't want invoices to be disputed. You want them settled. So I think the whole accuracy of the process and the predictiveness, that's what it needs to do.
I think
sorry.
I know. I mean, they're definitely, obviously, I don't tend to mention too many businesses on the platform, apart from the one I'm speaking about. But normally, I mean, you've got obviously companies like the Signal Group, AXS, like Vesson, and they obviously have their platforms with multi-modules about insights and fixtures and things. And then you get the more, obviously, the vessel performance-focused solutions. Do you think one day there'll be one company that just combines the two? And there probably obviously are at the moment, but one that really is very granular on things like emissions, engine monitoring solutions, as well as the pre and post fixture stuff.
I think these days, if you want to get best of breed, you need an API environment that you connect with. I don't think there's anybody out there who would claim to be best of breed in all areas. And of course, depending on it depends. There are essentially two process lines that you need to operate in. One is the commercial process line. That's like where a Vason, for example, operates. Other brands are available, obviously, but they're in the commercial process line. And then you've got the technical process line, technical operation. So, and the two things, they're related, but they're different specializations. So from a commercial process line, you want the voyage to be executed at 12.8 knots. So provided it happens at 12.8 knots, you're done. The technical process line will see how efficiently that 12.8 knots was delivered in terms of its optimization for emissions and all of those things. So so they are related activities, but they're not voyage delivered. The commercial voyage is not necessarily the same as although they're parallel, obviously, the technical voyage, the technical focus is different. And one of the things we wanted to do with Podium was because when you separate those process lines, there's a chance of a disconnect between the people that are delivering those two things. But we wanted those two lines to be operating from the same pool of data, so there was no dispute between, because my system says this, Your system says that. Now we've got to
Yeah.
spend time reconciling the two, and that's again just a wasted effort.
Yeah, and that's how we work. To be honest, we're exactly the same. We split our kind of market mapping and our services into the commercial maritime software space and the technical maritime software space. And often on the technical side, you're dealing with people from the seafaring background and marine engineers, that type of thing. They have a different understanding of the vessel, obviously, to the ex-charterers or brokers or analysts, that type of thing. So we do the same on our side.
And I think one of the things we really need to pay attention to is about the load on the seafarer. And I don't think we always talk enough about that, because a lot of the data granularity is delivered by somebody on a ship running around with a pencil and a piece of paper and filling in an Excel spreadsheet, for example. So I think we need to constantly think about not only are we serving our own requirement, whether it be, like I said, emissions or whatever, but what is the impact on the ship? Because I suspect there are still, until we get to a more sensor-driven environment where we're getting streaming data or streaming telemetry off the ships, that data requirement is going to be fulfilled by some poor bugger on a ship, excuse me for saying that, running around with a pencil and a dipstick.
Yeah, well, I really like shipping systems have got a really interesting initiative whereby they have a captain kind of training course that they embed into their business. So I think if they can get like a dedicated internal person that's predominantly from the shore base first, and then goes out on board vessels and things to try and be that digital point of contact predominantly, that could be another idea, another sort of solution. Just turn it off.
Yeah, I think we just want. It's a little bit like you want the operations team to focus on the things that matter rather than focus on everything. And again, what is it you want the ship's team to deliver for you? You want them to deliver a great voyage. You're disappearing.
Dark. I know.
Wow.
The moody.
I spent a lot of my life in the dark, but that's okay.
Yeah. No, good. Well, no, I appreciate that. And I know we just. It's like interesting to see, I think, what's happening in the market nowadays to compare to what it was like before over the last 10, 15 years or so. So, I mean, talking again about your previous experience and what you've done on the side throughout your career, you've obviously spent some time as a firefighter, I saw.
Not a lot. Yeah, okay.
Was that from obviously your marine background as well? Kind of, is it sort of stem off that, or what sort of spurred that on?
It's related. I think. It's almost a midlife crisis thing, and not a lot of people ask me about it, but I'm happy to talk about it.
No problem.
It was one of those things where, a person of a certain age starts thinking, oh, there's something missing from my life, and I was thinking about maybe a motorbike or whatever. Yeah. And the way it actually turned out was I showed up at a school fete, one of my daughter's school fetes, and the fire engine was there, and there's kids crawling all over the fire engine. I just got to chatting to one of the firefighters. And then I found out that the fire engine in the village that I lived was staffed by, they were called part-time retained firefighters. So not entirely volunteer, but part-time retained. And there was not a single whole-time firefighter in the village. There was about 15 people who kept the fire engine available 24/7. And this guy said to me, he said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm ex-merchant Navy. And oh, you've done a bit of firefighting, have you? Oh, yeah. A lot of time in breathing apparatus for chemical tankers. And he said, why don't you join us as a firefighter then? And so I'm standing there in this school field thinking, motorcycle, fire engine, motorcycle, fire engine, motorcycle, fire engine.
Yeah.
And so I signed up, and I spent 5 years in the fire service. I think perhaps I started driving a desk a little bit too early, but I had a great time working with a great team of people. And that was one of the big learnings from that, actually, was that from that period. I'd been working on my own. I'd been a sort of for quite a lot, been in charge of a team lead and all the rest of it. And it's almost like the loneliness of command. And sometimes it's kind of refreshing to get back into an environment where you rely on others because you can't fight a fire. Well, you can try, but running a firefighting operation is very much a team operation, and you do have to trust. Because you are, when you enter a burning building with somebody else in breathing apparatus, you are backing each other up to the max. Yeah. So that was kind of a good bit. But essentially I was servicing a midlife crisis, but hopefully in a positive way.
A very positive way, yeah. Mine hasn't been in this quite so positive and often quite expensive. So, but no, it's really, really impressive.
My other one involved a V8. But anyway, so that was. I don't think you should just have one. Don't restrict yourself to one crisis. Have a few. It's okay.
I agree. I think it's probably due my second or third soon. But no, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing all your insights. Any other hobbies that we haven't talked about? Anything else people might not know about you before we let you go?
Well, I'm a sort of, I think some of my hobbies involve failures. I'm a failed kite surfer. I didn't do very well at that. These days, I spend a lot of time walking in. I always think about. So I grew up in the Welsh valleys. I've always had. Always enjoyed hill walking and mountains, and so happily my partner enjoys that too. And then I've also enjoyed water sports. So, but these days they're more slightly more sedate than trying to kite surf. I like a bit of stand-up paddleboarding and stuff like that. So yeah, bit of mountains and sea are really the things that I think it's where I started, and it's where I'm sort of ending too. So fantastic. Not that I'm going anywhere soon.
Did you meet Alex, one of the co-founders of Sirocco, who's the former, he is the kite surfing world champion. He was at one of the events recently. He's a really interesting guy.
No, I didn't meet him, but I probably would have. I spent most of my time with salt water streaming out of my various orifices because I did the whole Superman thing. So, but I tried quite hard, but I just launched myself off the board face first into the water and be dragged by this kite for some distance and end up being sort of falling out as a drowning rat. But it was good fun to try. But I think one of the difficulties with it, I think, at least when I came back to the UK, was you need to practice to be good, clearly. And in order to practice, you need to be able to drop everything. When surf's up, you've got to go. And I couldn't do that. So I couldn't spend the time I needed. But I think that's probably a feeble excuse, but that is my excuse.
No, excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. Good. And in case anybody wants to reach out to you to learn a bit more about what we've discussed today or anything in general, what's the best way for them to contact you?
I think it's always good. LinkedIn's great. So I'm always available on LinkedIn, and so relatively easy to find, I think. There's a website for Cardinal Point Marine, which again, that gives you some contact details there. Or just mike@cp.marine.co.uk, and there you go. That's it.
Excellent, great. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Mike, and really interesting to hear your background and the experiences you've had. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Callum. Having said that, I think I should retire now, but anyway.
I'm sorry about the whole Bohemian Rhapsody theme we got going on here. But no, cool. All right, Mike. Nice to speak to you again.
Thanks very much, Callum. All the best.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Maritime Software Hub. I really enjoyed my conversation with Mike. What an interesting guy, fantastic kind of career and different sort of aspects of the commercial and technical shipping kind of role he's played over his career. Also, incredibly nice guy, to be honest with you. He's very, very easy to talk to, easy to get on with, and again, very knowledgeable. So a huge thank you to him for his time and sharing his experiences. Please do, if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's hugely appreciated, helps us with our audience exposure, and also support and kind of follow or like our podcast on different channels. Thank you again for listening, and we'll speak again soon.